Welcome to the Checkup Tete-a-Tete, where we interview and converse with renowned names in the medical field. In this edition of the Checkup Tete-a-Tete, we have with us Dr. Vivek Pai, the director of the Bombay Leprosy Project. Dr. Pai has dedicated his career spanning over 3 decades to resolving the problem of leprosy in India. Let's hear more about his journey and his phenomenal work in the field of leprosy.
The first question that we have is why did you choose to become a leprologist?
I'm thankful to you for inviting me and the opportunity for the opportunity to talk on the occasion of World Leprosy Day. World Leprosy Day is observed on the fifth Sunday of the month of January to commemorate and to create a global awareness in view of global leprosy. And also the 30th January to observe the martyrdom day of our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi ji, worked for the cause of leprosy and appealed and shown himself, how to, with the passion and the care, the sympathy for the cause of leprosy. So that was the spirit and the movement which he started. And the 30th January happened to be the martyrdom day. So that is observed as anti-leprosy day. And thereafter, you have, earlier it used to be a week, and now it's a fortnight that is observed, a fortnight of programs for awareness on leprosy, so that the people are engaged in the program and their cooperation is solicited to achieve the goals of the national leprosy eradication program. Now, with this preamble, your question of why did you choose to become a leprologist? The leprologist is a subspecialty of dermatology, and my background being dermatology, leprosy is a subspecialty of dermatology. So leprosy is a part of dermatology, and I am basically, by background, I am a dermatologist. And leprosy fascinated in terms of the challenges that have been there from years, and the need for to understand leprosy and to serve the cause of leprosy is what motivated me. And as I was pursuing my post-graduation dermatology in Grand Medical College and JJ Group of Hospitals, I was attending to the leprosy OPD at that time. And that's how my first interaction with the leprosy patients with the program of leprosy started. And that motivated me because there itself I knew there was a lot of areas that need to be understood, that need to be addressed. This I'm talking in 1987. So at that time, that was the scenario, and therefore we took it forward. And then and you need to understand a chronic disease like leprosy, which is not going to give you answers in a short period. You need to understand the disease from a longer perspective. And therefore, that's how we choose to work on various areas, especially on the clinical aspects, the chemotherapy. And leprosy is not a disease with only clinical, outlook. It has several dimensions to it. And therefore, that, motivated, interested to sort of understand. By working only, you can understand the disease much better.
So moving on to understanding what is the current status of leprosy in India and the world.
Yeah, now leprosy, India contributes, if you look at the global figures, the WHO, reports around 220,000 new cases, new infections, that is new patients diagnosed with leprosy. That's a global figures we are looking at. And amongst them, if you look at India, as I mentioned, when you look at globally 220,000 cases new every year, 56 to 57% of that global cases come from India. So which in terms of absolute numbers, it comes out to almost 1,40,000 new cases. So that's the numbers we are looking at from Indian context. So that is the scenario and what has happened is though the numbers have gone down. If you look at global figures, 16 million people affected with leprosy have been cured of the disease. So that's a phenomenal achievement. And the same is the true for India also, as lakhs of people have been cured of the disease. But what has happened is, since last 10 years, we are looking at a figure which is constant. That means the new case detection has been constant. It's not dropping. It is plateaued to the tune of 1,35,000 to 1,40,000. So this number has been stagnant, and that is a matter of worry and concern. Prevalence of the disease has fallen, but the new case detection is, has remained constant for the last 10 years.
Right. So, like you said, the world's most leprosy cases are in India. So, what is the reason that India has so many leprosy cases every year?
See, I think if you look at the history, you have to go back to the history or the historical aspects from early medieval period also, and from the mankind history. Leprosy has been predominantly present in the Indian subcontinent. India is one of them. Then we have other neighboring countries like Bangladesh. Then you have Sri Lanka. Then you have Nepal. Then you have Philippines, Indonesia, and Myanmar. So all these countries which are part of Southeast Asia, and then even some of the islands like Micronesia. So some of all these some of these countries are predominantly, leprosy has been in the Indian subcontinent since ages, and therefore India contributes almost 57% of the global number of cases. The next country next to India is Brazil, which is in South America, and there are certain South American countries where there have been leprosy, like Brazil is there. Then you have Portugal. Then you have Uruguay, Paraguay, and Mexico. So these have been the countries where leprosy had been there, and some African countries like Madagascar and Senegal and Ethiopia. So leprosy is still there in some of these countries. But if you look at the more than 119, 20 countries where leprosy endemic, but now the endemic countries have gone down, but leprosy remains here in these countries. Therefore, though India has declared eliminated, but India is now looking at subnational level elimination. If you look at the Indian scenario, prevalence rate, it is less than 1 per 10,000 population. That means you have achieved elimination. India has declared it also in the WHO platform. But what you need to look at is pockets within India, and therefore you need to look at subnational elimination. And even at the state level, you need to go down to the district level elimination.
And are there any measures to prevent leprosy from happening?
The major measures to prevent leprosy is to detect people affected with leprosy. There are no tests. Unlike so many other investigations, other diseases where you have tests, you can detect COVID, you can detect by RT-PCR. Then you have malaria, you can take a blood smear and test. Then you have dengue, then you have typhoid, you have other diseases where you can diabetes, you can check blood sugar. But here there are no tests as yet. So that's a challenge. That's a big area. That is big challenge that is left. So that means you are left with only clinical diagnosis. So clinically, you need to diagnose people affected with leprosy early enough and put them under treatment, bring them under treatment so that the transmission chain is broken at the earliest. And therefore, this is how you can prevent others from getting leprosy. Now, that is one aspect. Now, the program has now introduced, the chemoprophylaxis. That means the index case in a house, you have a person affected. So he becomes the index case. And household contacts, the family members of the immediate family members of that household index case, they are examined, because contact leprosy is another aspect. Contact leprosy is one where immediate family members are at high risk. Then you have clusters, adjoining neighbors. Then you have clusters. So that's how the risk gets diminished. But the maximum risk is at the household family members, where the leprosy risk is very high. And therefore, they are given chemoprophylaxis. That means a single dose of a strong bactericidal drug is given, like rifampicin, and that is chemo, because you are giving a drug. So it is called chemoprophylaxis. to household contacts, and so that they won't, if they are examined, there has to be a strong indication. If there are contraindications, then you can't give. But if there are strong indications, they are eligible and they are willing, then they are given a single dose so that they don't get leprosy. So these are measures. And then another important thing is awareness. You need to make the people aware so that the people need to report voluntarily, because the leprosy is a very innocuous disease and it doesn't cause any symptoms, though it is caused by Mycobacterium leprae, mycobacteria, which affects primarily the peripheral nerves and secondarily affects the skin, and with a special affinity for the nerve. So, and despite an individual harboring so many organisms, billions of organisms, there are no toxin released. So it's a non-toxic organism, but it likes to live there. It likes to multiply very slowly and make its way into various tissues very slowly. So the incubation period is also 2 to 5 years, sometimes 10 years, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 10 years, sometimes more than that. So the disease manifests very slowly. So an individual is also not aware because it doesn't cause any symptoms. It is on the skin, it is in the nerve, and the numbness people don't appreciate also. So people present with diffuse changes on the skin of the face, on the ears, or you get a change of texture of the skin. So unless one eyes know about it, then it is difficult to see that. So it is therefore very important to look at the subtle changes and pick it up early enough. And so this is the shiny oily skin, as we often call it, on the face, on the hands, the dorsum of the hands. So there is a change in the texture, there's a change in the look, appearance of the skin, and that is where it should be picked up. And other symptoms, symptomatology, other signs, I won't call it a symptom because patients don't report it. So other signs are like skin lesions, which are pale colored or sometimes reddish. They are well defined. You can identify that, or sometimes it is ill defined. So it is difficult to sort of notice that. And the hallmark is, these are, I am talking of cardinal signs, and the hallmark is the loss of sensation or diminished sensations in the skin lesions. So this is the hallmark. And then, and since there are no symptoms, an individual doesn't report to the health facility. So therefore, you need an active case detection system, a mechanism by which health workers, volunteers, they are trained. We train them so that they go into the community. The program, within the program, there are paramedical workers, there are healthcare workers, there are multi-purpose workers, community volunteers who need to be trained and who are trained and who go into the house-to-house surveys and then detect, suspect, and then direct them to the health facility where the diagnosis is either confirmed or ruled out. And then one more test that can be done, the only test that can be done at the referral center level, is the skin smear. The skin smear is the only test by which you can confirm the diagnosis in the infectious category. See, there are two types of leprosy. You have an infectious type and a non-infectious type. So in the infectious type, to clinch the diagnosis, you need to have a skin smear. In the program, it is not there, but there are certain referral centers, tertiary care centers, where this technique is still practiced, and it is a very valuable thing. And we have also been communicating to the program managers that it is important that this can be brought back into this program, so that it is very helpful in confirming sometimes very difficult to diagnose, difficult to identify such cases, and to confirm the diagnosis. The skin smear helps, and especially in relapse, in diagnosing relapse, where the treatment has completed, and then the people come back with the fresh signs and symptoms of the disease once again. So these are the the cardinal signs. And then the neurological affliction results in numbness of the hands and feet. Then you have blisters, you have scalds due to burns unknowingly, then especially in women while cooking, while doing their household chores. So they subject themselves to a lot of pressure and then the burns, and they are not aware of, because there is no sensations. So that is the first time that you get the burns, you get scalds, numbness, and then ulcers. You get trophic changes. We call them trophic changes because they are there's no sensations in the hands of feet. and that gives rise to non-healing wounds. For a long time, the wound doesn't heal. Now, that is when one has to suspect or at least report or diagnose that this could be leprosy. So the fact that you need to keep the community health volunteers, the paramedical workers, they need to keep this in mind that this could be leprosy, and therefore this needs to be investigated from the point of view of diagnosing leprosy. So these are the manifestations, the classifications to identify. The people should know, people should be aware. So awareness is basically on this counts, so that people, the general public, the mass public is aware of these, and then they can come forward to get themselves examined at the earliest.
What are the common misconceptions about this disease?
The misconceptions, there are many actually, because it's a historical disease, and it's been there since biblical times. So there have been concepts, there have been myths, there have been misunderstanding and wrong understanding of the disease earlier, much before, because it used to be considered, myth number one is it used to be considered that it's a disease manifestations of wrongful sins or a curse for wrongful doings or misgivings. Then you have a misunderstanding or a myth that one can get leprosy while shaking hands with people or sitting with people affected with leprosy or sharing with people affected with leprosy. Another myth is that it is transmitted from mother to child, or there is a conjugal leprosy. So these are the myths. And then another most important starking myth is that it causes a lot of ghastly deformities, very fearful deformities. Or that your fingers get amputated once you get the disease. So these are all myths. These are nothing but these are all wrong understanding about the disease. These are all misconceptions, and this is not truth at all. And these are more of misconceptions that have been going. These are myths. So you need to break these myths, and which are resulting in delay in the signs and symptoms of the disease, and therefore delay in reporting of the disease, and therefore delay in presenting and delay in the treatment. So these myths need to be busted and debunked, which can be done only by awareness and bringing in positive aspects of the disease, and so that people are aware and understand the correct facts of the disease. That it's a scientific disease. It is caused by an organism, Mycobacterium leprae, as I mentioned earlier, like any other disease. It is like any other disease that is to be understood, and it can be cured. And most important myth is that it cannot be cured. So the fact that it can be cured, it is a curable disease. This fact has to be, message has to go across the people. So then that confidence, then the trust, the builds, and the people understand it in the right perspective.
Now, you already discussed what are the current treatment and investigation plans in the current program, but is there any scope to improvise these treatment methods?
Yeah, the current treatment has been also rationalized from the earlier treatment, when it was more of a lifelong treatment. So changes have come tremendously from last 1981. For the last 20 and 40 years, for the last 4 decades, the treatment is based on a chemotherapy which is called multi-drug therapy. The WHO brought in this concept because drug resistance was building up to dapsone monotherapy, which was the only drug at that time, and even before that it was the chaul mogra oil. The chaul mogra oil was used, as the eternal treatment. But then came the dapsone monotherapy era in 1940s, and in 1980s came the era of multi-drug therapy. So multi-drug therapy means you have more than one drug. It's not monotherapy; it is 3 drugs. So 3 drugs for multibacillary leprosy, as I mentioned, 2 types of leprosy: paucibacillary and multibacillary. Paucibacillary is where you have less affliction of the skin and the nerve, and multibacillary is when there are more skin lesions, when there are more nerve involvement, which means it has spread to more areas of the body. And therefore, paucibacillary would mean you treat for a shorter period, that is 6 months. And multibacillary means because it is multi, so you need to treat it for a longer period, that is 1 year. So the multi-drug treatment, which is also, has been given free of cost by Novartis. The Novartis provides this multi-drug treatment blister calendar packs, which are well-designed packs that are patient-friendly, customer-friendly, very easy to understand. They are safe and they are preserved well. And this is provided by Novartis to WHO. WHO then provides to leprosy endemic countries like India. And then from Delhi, it goes to various states. And from the states, it is then given to various districts and NGOs. So this is how the flow of the drug comes. And it is provided at every health facility. Now that leprosy is integrated into the general healthcare services since 2005, the treatment is available in various primary healthcare centers, community healthcare centers, then the tertiary referral centers of various NGOs in the country. So, and this has been the mainstay. And on this basis only, I told that 16 million people have been cured of the disease world over. Because this drug has, this treatment has there in every leprosy endemic country. So it's a uniform treatment all over the world. There is definitely a scope for improvement. You need to have better drugs. You need to have second line drugs. You need to have third line drugs when there are incidents, or when there are instances when there are drug resistance, when a person is not able to tolerate the existing line of management. So in such instances, you need to have second line, third line, better drugs. Or in future also, we can further improve with the newer drugs, and that will help to further, shorten the line of management.
Okay. And is there a treatment for, when the hands or legs, they get deformed? So is there a
Yeah.
treatment process for that?
Definitely, you are asked a very important question, because leprosy, as I mentioned, it is affecting primarily the nerves and secondarily the skin. Having affected, it's the only bacteria that enters the nerve. And once it enters the nerve, it can cause nerve damage. And nerve damage results in sensory or motor loss in the hands and feet or the eyes also. So we need to identify them early, and then look for them. So the staff, the people are trained, the workers, the paramedical, they are trained so that they need to pick up nerve damage early enough, and then prevent them or treat them. Because you have medical management, very good drugs now, like you have MDT, you have other drugs which are identified specially to treat the nerve damage. So these drugs have to be applied wherever it is required, so that you can prevent the nerve damage and even reverse the nerve damage, so that the numbness or even the early deformity can be corrected. Now at Bombay Leprosy Project Referral Center, we have several instances where patients are referred from various health facilities from Mumbai and from adjoining areas, from various districts in Maharashtra for various reasons, sometimes diagnostic reasons, sometimes for bacteriological examination, sometimes for reactions, which is a part of immunological process while the patient is on treatment or after the treatment, and sometimes for management of some intractable reactions, difficult to treat reactions, and also possible relapses, or investigating them or managing them. So these are various conditions when people are referred to our center at the Leprosy Referral Center, which is a specialized center, so that patients can get the maximum benefit. So as I mentioned that, and these are the patients who need management of nerves, medical management, and physiotherapy. Physiotherapy plays a very important role because it's a part of disability prevention and medical rehabilitation. It is called as a DPMR component of the National Leprosy Eradication Program. Now, this component comprises basically medical management of the nerve damage, of identifying the reactions, of identifying the neuritis, or silent neuritis. There's a condition called silent neuritis wherein the patient doesn't complain of pain, but there is a surreptitiously happening nerve damage, and that has to be recognized, that has to be identified, and then you need to intervene actively and early enough so that you can prevent the consequences of the nerve damage. The consequences of the nerve damage are sensory loss, then you have motor damage, you get a clawing of the fingers, That is early change, motor damage. Then you have clawing. It is called mobile claw. If the mobile claw is not treated, then it goes into a fixed claw. And then if the sensations are not taken care of, the loss of sensation is not taken care of, then it would result in non-healing wounds, which can further go into secondary complications and cellulitis and things like that. So there are, and then sometimes even to the extent of bone involvement in the foot. So these all needs to be taken care at identified early and intervened early enough so that the primary doesn't go into the second, the grade 1 doesn't go into the grade 2 deformity, or the grade 2 doesn't go into further complications. So all this need to be identified, and that is where in the reference center we look at all these things. But everything is not possible to be done at reference center. You need to have field approach also. So we have field approach where in the field you can provide these interventions. We have a mobile team that goes into the field in the urban slums and the rural areas also, not very far from here, about 150 kilometers from here. So the mobile team goes, there are people stationed. In fact, there are people affected with leprosy whom we have rehabilitated. They were people affected with leprosy, but today they are not. So they are free of the disease. And they identify the people, other people affected with the disease in the community. They are like champions of the cause. They are like ambassadors of the disease. So they know better because they have gone through the fire of the disease. And when they go into the community, they explain to the people. So we have people affected with the leprosy who are as a part of integrated rehabilitation. Uh, they create awareness. They pick up people with deformity, and they provide doorstep services into the rural areas as well as in the urban slums. So that there is a field component also. Everything cannot be, sort of saturated at a referral center. You need to decentralize also. So that is how we have a mixed approach, both field component as well as a referral center approach. And then we try and do justice. And there are n number of examples where we have corrected the deformity. Claw hand, the deformed hand is now back into his normal functions, his normal appearance of the hand. So that, and then the functions are also restored. So what is the message is that early identification of the nerve damage and early management. Sometimes we may have to resort to reconstructive surgeries also, so that you, besides medical management, or in a young individual, when sometimes the medical management doesn't work, so we need to take help of reconstructive surgery, corrective surgery, so that the deformity can be corrected wherever possible.
The last question we have here is, what is the counseling process for a person with leprosy?
The counseling process starts from the day of diagnosis. You see, it is very important to counsel, because when you break the diagnosis, the leprosy carries a lot of self-perceived stigma. So when you break the diagnosis, you need to make the people, a person affected, about the positive aspects of the disease. And it is like any other disease that has to be explained from the very first day, because that mental stress that the patient carries, that needs to be looked at, that needs to be relieved tremendously. Because when you say that it is like any other disease, and the treatment is very good because it cures the disease, it takes care of the bacterial component, and it is a bacterial disease, and it can be treated and cured, and the treatment is provided free of cost. So all this helps to alleviate the kind of stress when the diagnosis is made. And then more importantly, while the treatment is going on, to the patient needs to be counseled that the completion of treatment is very important. Adherence to the treatment is very important. And defaulting will cause unnecessary problems. So defaulting from treatment for the 6 months for postbacillary, 1 year for the multibacillary, the defaulting should not take place. So we have a system wherein due date is given to the individual, so that the patient follows up as per the due date. He doesn't forget. And even if he forgets, we have a reminder system to the patients by way of mobile phones or digital technology, so that the patients are aware that they have to be coming on a particular date for their next dose, or their next dose. So the doses are framed at once a month, and therefore they need to be made aware. So, and the patient is reminded of these days he should attend for the treatment. And if at all a patient still doesn't come, then we make it try and reach out to his house on a domestic front so that we can deliver the treatment at his house, so that the treatment is not interrupted. Now, this happened in the COVID period when everything was in standstill. Areas were suspended. There were containment zones. There were buffer zones. There was no proper transport, and the people were not able to get their treatment. So we had to do it by telephone, by WhatsApp, by email, by using motorcycles, by reaching out, by using our vehicle to reach out to the patient so that the treatment doesn't get interrupted. Uninterrupted treatment is the key. So the counseling has to be on these fronts. And another aspect for counseling is the care of the hands and feet. People where the hands are affected, there is a loss of sensations, there is a deformity. So a lot of counseling is very important. Every visit, one needs to counsel. The patient has to understand, because his cooperation and his participation, empowering the people affected with leprosy, is very important. So if they understand that this is how the deformity can be corrected, or this is how the care of hands and feet and eyes is taken, then I think most of the job is done. So counseling plays a very, very important role. It is not just a medical management, physiotherapy, physical management, but counseling at every possible step, right from the day one of diagnosis, during treatment, after treatment. Even after treatment, some of the proportion of patients have a tendency for various clinical problems, such as reactions, such as neurological problems, such as pain, such as neuropathic pain, such as nerve damage, such as deformity, or relapse at a later stage. So all this has to be, patients have to be understanding, or their family members, involving their family members in their care of hands and feet is very important. So this is how the entire family counseling, individual counseling, this is how the counseling process goes, and it plays a very important role besides the medical and the physical management.
Great. I think it was a very useful session, and I'm sure that all the people who read the Checkup Magazine will benefit from it. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
And we are thankful as Bombay Leprosy Project, as an NGO engaged in leprosy relief work for the last 46 years, relentlessly, and overcoming several constraints and hurdles. It's a journey has been very, very fascinating and very satisfying and humbling in reaching out to the thousands of patients whom we have treated, we have diagnosed, treated, and they are and the smile that we see on their face is really, really gratifying. And we are thankful to the government of India, government of Maharashtra, the MCGM, and the most importantly, all the well-wishers and the donors and the stakeholders and all our donors. Without their support, it is very, very difficult to sort of undertake this work. So our sincere gratitude to them, and I take help of this platform today. We all collectively need to work on the leftover issues, residual issues, leftover problem, so that we look at an India, leprosy-free India, or a world without leprosy.
Yes, definitely.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Until next time, with another tete-a-tete by the checkup. See you guys soon.